Hello and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. Jamie and I are interviewing someone who's an expert in nutrition today. We are blessed to have Courtney Warday with us. And just to give you a little bit of a bio on Courtney, Courtney is a registered dietitian and fertility nutrition coach who is based in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is real close to where I am. And she's the owner of Abide With Me Nutrition, a virtual nutrition private practice that helps spiritually driven women and couples optimize their fertility and balance their hormones through diet and lifestyle. And she has a personal experience herself in secondary infertility, struggling with PCOS and endometriosis. So she knows what couples go through, and I'm sure that helps her in working with many, many couples to reach their family building, their infertility goals. So thank you, Courtney, for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Courtney. And when Teresa was introducing you, I thought, man, a perfect, this is just a perfect type of episode. We've heard from women who've been interviewed, who struggle with infertility. And then, of course, Teresa and I just released an episode not long ago about infertility. But what I think, it's such a broad, huge topic and something that we talked about in our last episode, whenever it was in season 2 with infertility, is that infertility really is not like the diagnosis. It's the symptom of something that's the root cause. And so that's what I'm really excited to talk with you about, Courtney, is about that. So, Courtney, tell us just a little bit, 1 or 2 minutes of just a little bit about you. Like, where are you from? I know you said you're from Nebraska or Lincoln, Nebraska, your kids, kind of what got you wrapped into it for a couple minutes, and then we'll start really digging in to the content.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Courtney Warday. Me and my husband Kyle have been married for 5.5 years, and we have two beautiful girls. Ellie is 4, and then Claire, our little miracle, is just turned 1, which is awesome. It's like amazing. She's the most joyful baby ever, so it's
Mm.
awesome. Yeah, I became a dietitian about 4 years ago, and I entered into my business just with my own personal story, kind of like you were alluding to. So yeah, we went through almost 2 years of secondary infertility. We conceived our first daughter, Ellie, pretty much right away after doing creatine charting and finding out that I had low progesterone. And then when the second time around, it just wasn't happening as quickly. We ended up actually going to the St. Paul Institute eventually and getting some hormones drawn, and ended up having surgery. And that's when they found the endometriosis and the PCOS as well. And yeah, that's kind of just where I was asking just so many why questions of, I mean, I'm a dietitian, I eat healthy. They didn't teach us a ton about fertility nutrition or hormone nutrition at all in college. And so that's kind of when I was very, very just intrigued and started to really dive into the research with fertility nutrition. And once it was able to kind of help on my own journey, I just felt really called to be able to help so many other women, because it just can be really overwhelming and confusing. Um, and you can almost feel like paralyzed as to like what to do next. And so, yeah, that's kind of a little brief synopsis of how I got to where I am now.
That's great, Courtney. I think one of the questions that I get asked often from patients who are, in a fertility journey is, what should I be eating? What diet should I be, taking on? And you're right, in medicine, and it's true in nutrition, sometimes we learn when we're in practice that I guess there's just so much more out there that we didn't learn in school. And this is so true of kind of that underlying root cause. I think we learn diagnoses and we learn treatment protocols, but we oftentimes kind of don't have time to really dig in and try to look at what's the root cause of things. How can I really prevent things from occurring? And so you're right. This is something where in the area of nutrition, there's a lot of information, but oftentimes it's not disseminated to people in a way that's helpful. So tell us a little bit about what your approach with couples is and how you started your personal practice.
Absolutely. So you're definitely right in that, where I basically had to learn so much on my own. And I was really intrigued by the functional type of mindset where you get to that root cause. And I feel like a lot of just information was just like laid in my lap, of some of these amazing functional type dietitians that are out there that are doing amazing things with hormones and fertility. And so in my own journey too, just kind of, doing some more lab testing, and even like stool testing in my own personal gut health journey, was really impactful. And so in my practice, I do a lot of lab testing to really get to what's going on. If they have PCOS, maybe they have insulin resistance that might be blocking ovulation, or high prolactin or high testosterone, or maybe their inflammation biomarker is just high, and that could be causing some issues. And I don't personally like look at sperm analysis, but I do, if someone has like a sperm type of or low sperm count or low testosterone or something coming back on that end as well, then there's things we can do, nutrition and diet and lifestyle wise too. So it really depends on what's going on. And that's why I love, the personalized approach with each of my clients, because it's very different depending. I mean, there are certain things you can do just generally, but to really get down to that root cause, and like my goal is to optimize their health and allow their bodies to just get back to the way that God designed them. And that can lead to optimal fertility. And so it's a lot of people don't really understand the like amount of things that really can impact fertility, like your gut health, and even just movement and stress is a huge underrated thing that can play a role. Environmental toxins, and then just in general, balancing your blood sugar and things like that. They're reducing inflammation. There's a lot that can go into it that people don't really fully know. It's never taught. And that's kind of one of my missions, is like, I want people to know that they can really get pregnant naturally. Obviously God opens and closes the womb, but ultimately, there is a lot we can do to really optimize that and dig a little bit deeper, and to see what could be going on.
Courtney, that was all very good and so important. So thank you for all your work. It's an important job, because again, like, I'm sure it was not easy to dig into all of this, and you took that initiative. And so that's amazing. Your clients are blessed. So you were talking about, doing some testing, lab testing. Do you do Dutch, or what do you do to get that information?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking into and actually starting. I have a client right now that's going to be doing Dutch, and that's something that I'm continuing to dig into. Right now, I do, it just really depends on the symptoms, and it's more of kind of, yeah, like a C-reactive protein, the thyroid, full thyroid panel, fasting glucose and insulin, and some of those other blood biomarkers. But I'm definitely excited to continue to keep growing my practice and adding the Dutch test to that as well.
Yeah. And something else I'll just share too is I love acronyms and I love analogies. I love them both because it helps us remember things. But just for our listeners, something that I realized has kind of an easy name of an acronym, because if it's an acronym, you want it to be easy. GILLAS. GILAS. So I train hormone coaches, and I'm always trying to figure out, how do I simply share how this works? Like, how, because it's not simple, it's super complicated. But GILLAS, GILAS. So gut, inflammation, liver, adrenals, sex hormones, GILLAS. And so when we think
Yeah.
about like the root, how do we restore our health? I like how you talk about like hormone nutrition, fertility nutrition, really thinking about that really baseline that won't just help you with fertility or your hormones, but so many things, your serotonin
Yes.
levels, your mood, it addresses so much. So Courtney, maybe share with us just a little bit, like, what is just one overlooked thing that so many women could easily start with that many women don't even know to try in terms of restoring hormone health?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorite things to share with my clients that's often overlooked is just even including healthy fats, because that's kind of the backbone of our hormones. So if we're not including healthy fats, and a lot of people grew up with their moms and like the low fat craze, and it's important even for balancing blood sugar and things as well. And so that's one thing I find that a lot of my clients who come to me are not consuming near enough of, or even much at all.
You said your mom, some of the moms. I'm like, what are you talking about, Courtney? I was in the low fat phase.
Well,
Oh wait, I'm a lot older than you. Okay. Yeah. I was referred to it as the snack well phenomenon.
yes,
I'll never forget. And actually my mom was in the low fat craze too with me, but the snack well cookie, which I still gravitate myself towards at times, is this idea. And after that, all the packaging said low fat, right? But
yeah,
the problem is that everything low fat has a massive amount of sugar in it. And what
yes,
it causes hyperinsulinemia, which causes chronic inflammation.
yes,
And then what other people don't realize is that all hormones start with cholesterol. Like they're all in a pathway, and at the very top of that pathway is cholesterol, and cholesterol has to come from a fat source. So if you don't have cholesterol, you don't have fat, you don't have healthy hormones. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I really look at in my research. I was really fascinated by, because in conventional medicine, you are like freak out if you have high cholesterol. Not that I'm saying you want high cholesterol, but if I'm seeing like a 160 cholesterol, I'm thinking your hormones, and then I'm seeing low estrogen and low progesterone. I'm thinking, well, we need to get that cholesterol up so that your body is able to produce and allow those hormones to work efficiently. And so that's another thing that a lot of my clients are like surprised by. They're like, what? But I've always been told like, this is great. My cholesterol is great. And I'm like, well, it is for, I guess, your heart. And we don't want it to get like too high, but we also want it to be high enough that your hormones are able to work efficiently. So it's kind of fascinating.
Real quick, what are some examples of healthy fat foods?
Good question. So in general, like avocados or avocado oil, olive oil, nut butters, really most types of nuts in general. Even like in moderation, like coconut oil. And I'm trying to think if I missed any. I don't know.
Fatty fishes.
Yeah, fatty fishes like salmon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally.
Even like with fertility, like whole fat milk or dairy products has been in the research seen as beneficial as well.
Yeah, that was a study. I remember one of the doctors that came from actually Chile. I think she came to visit our clinic, and she was very interested in fertility and nutrition. And she said there was a comparison between the Mediterranean diet, which we know actually is very heart healthy, and it is, based in high quality fats. But they had two arms of the study, one with a low fat dairy and one with a high fat dairy. And so just that difference only. And definitely the significance in fertility rate being higher in the high fat dairy was, I don't remember the percentage, but it was strong. So get rid of that watery skim milk.
Yes.
Was another part of I can't even drink that stuff. And we did as kids. Again, I lived through the night. That stuff is like someone just took whole milk and added a half amount of water to it. And I don't know how people can drink it.
I don't know.
Yes.
And
it's terrible.
It's terrible.
It's so terrible. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's kind of one other like approach I take in general that people can be surprised by, is just like, I always like to take the approach of like, how can we add nutrition to our meals or snacks or things? And so it doesn't mean that you can never have like certain foods. It's just when we are having certain foods, like maybe like sweets or something, like maybe pairing it with something to make not only add nutrition but also balance your blood sugar. So I would tell people, do not do skim milk, or do not do low fat dairy, because it also, I'm in the research, can like increase androgens and things like that, which can increase like acne and create issues with PCOS and things. So
what would you say would be anti-inflammatory foods. I just ran across an article. I haven't checked the validity. So Teresa, Courtney, you guys can correct me. But normally when I think about, an anti-inflammatory diet, I think, sugar, no red meats, no carbs, no dairy. But I just ran across an article again, just cross-checked me, and maybe we don't know it right now. But now I'm learning about how dairy isn't actually a food that causes inflammation, and maybe it's that whole idea of if it's like um non-homogenized, which dairy works through a process where I don't know the whole thing, but it's manipulated, it's not full dairy. And so there's this difference. I know even with me in college, I never was lactose intolerant ever, and then I started having major bowel issues. I
Mm,
changed my milk drinking from homogenized to non-homogenized. Homogenized means it's manipulated and it's most milk that we're buying at the store. And then I
mhm.
switched to non-homogenized. So I'm wondering too if that has something to do with the inflammation. But yeah, speak to that. What are some anti-inflammatory foods that people who might be struggling could work to avoid?
In general, I like to also take the approach like with the anti-inflammatory type lifestyle, just like eating a lot more of certain foods and eating less of certain foods. So in general, like eating less foods of like sugar, like you were saying, refined grains. In general, like artificial flavorings or sweeteners can actually change the gut microbiome. And so in general, like reducing those type of things as well, fried foods, those are kind of some big targets to kind of try to avoid or to in general eat less of. And honestly, you'll see artificial flavorings in a lot of random processed foods. You kind of have to look at the label and the ingredients. As far as like eating more of foods, kind of some of those healthy fats that we mentioned, like the fatty fish, avocados, berries, nuts and seeds, in general, fruits and vegetables. And one interesting thing that people don't really think about with in reducing inflammation is adding or cooking with fresh herbs and spices. They kind of can help with reducing inflammation as well. And they taste a lot better than the store bought, or I guess like, yeah, the jarred spices and things like that. So I love to add like fresh oregano or fresh basil into especially like my Italian dishes. And getting that parsley can be really good, even just like on potatoes, just if you're roasting, and in other pasta or other dishes as well. So that's kind of what I usually say when I'm talking about an anti-inflammatory. I like the word lifestyle versus diet because
Hmm.
diet always signifies to me like temporary
Mm.
and like quick fix or something like that, versus lifestyles. Like that's kind of what I am very passionate about teaching my clients, is like how not only can they optimize fertility, but all of this is optimizing their health, and then they're able to take all these tools and be able to live a healthy lifestyle forever.
Love
Yeah,
it.
that's great. And anybody can grow an herb garden, no matter where you're
Yes.
at, right? There's all sorts of now ways people can just do their herbs on their windowsill or their porch or whatnot. So that's really cool. And you're right, Jamie, the dairy part of it, I think this is true in general of just food preparation. Is anything that's been modified or processed, we can generally assume it probably isn't the way God made it and probably isn't as healthy. And so, that's a part of it, I think, with the dairy. And the other part of it is that if the gut is already unhealthy, a lot of times we think of leaky gut, then there are more likely to be foods that cause inflammation in the gut lining, whether that be dairy or even vegetables for that matter. If the gut is already unhealthy, sometimes there has to be kind of drastic changes. And that's where testing is really helpful and trying to map out which, foods are causing inflammation for a patient rather than, just guessing what is going on. So I think that processed, anything that's been, and that's why gluten too. I mean, sometimes we think, well, is it really the gluten? I mean, gluten is something that was grown on this earth, or is it what we're doing to it? We strip it of its nature. We add all
Yep.
these chemicals back into it. Literally, we take it from being whole and brown and make it white and grind it into the finest powder, and we put it in everything. So it's more that part of it that's the problem, not necessarily the nature or the natural part of the grain.
How
Yeah.
accurate is like those allergy testing things? So how accurate is it? And then also like based on our age and stage and season, I've heard too those foods, of course, we might be intolerant of a food, at age 28, but then at age 34, oh, look at that. I don't have that intolerance anymore. It makes sense, if we're restoring our gut and restoring our health. But can you speak to that? I know that's often, it seems like a barrier when I'm talking to people, is the legitimacy of those tests, or if there are some that are good versus some that you'd steer away from in terms of those allergy testing things.
That's a great question. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not like the best expert in that area. And it's kind of funny that you asked that, because I actually am going under and doing like a food allergy test, because I personally have struggled with gut issues because of an infection I had when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And gut health has been like a big journey of mine. And I'm continuing. I feel like I like get healed and then it kind of something happens. And so I'm actually exploring that, and I wasn't really open to it prior just because of some of the research that I had seen. So maybe Teresa can even speak to that. But you know, I do believe that if there is certain foods that are triggering an immune response or kind of inflammation in your gut, that's not going to be conducive with fertility. And a lot of hormones and things are, and even like serotonin and neurotransmitter, your immune system's in your gut. So your gut is very, very important in your overall health and in general for fertility and your hormones. So I do believe that if there is something going on, or there is something that you're eating daily that might be triggering, then that's going to not impact your health in a negative way. But maybe Teresa can speak to that even too.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is confusing. So the way I explain it to patients is that there's two types of sensitivities or allergies. I mean, in testing, and most doctors only do the one, and that's IgE testing. So that's like you're allergic to peanuts, right? I mean, we can think of that one as an easy one. When they test someone, a child maybe who had a reaction to peanuts, they test for IgE, which is an immune response, right? And it causes itching, and your throat might feel itchy, and you can even have an anaphylactic reaction. And so there's traditional food allergy panels that test for IgE. Food sensitivity is different. Food sensitivity is IgG, which is a different type of immune response. It causes different symptoms, and basically it goes to the leaky gut phenomenon. And it's not perfect. I'm not going to say it's a perfect test, but it is a guidance, and it helps people know, one, it just tells them how leaky their gut is. For example, if you do a food sensitivity test of, let's say, I usually use a 96 food panel, and like half the thing lights up red, then you have a leaky gut, because that means the proteins from food in your one cell lining of your gut wall are spilling out, and that's called intestinal permeability. And so they can measure different food proteins through that. So now, again, does that mean you're allergic and you can't ever eat that food again? No, but it means that for a period of time, you probably want to eliminate, if you're like got all the dairies on there or eggs on there, or it might be certain amounts of like cruciferous vegetables even, or nuts, whatever it is, it can guide you at least in what's causing the inflammation in my gut. And then you may need to redo the test, a year down the road, and then say, oh, well, I'm not sensitive to those foods anymore. I'll try to add those back in and see how my body reacts. Ultimately, it's still, you have to know your body and its reaction to the foods. But that's the difference. There's food sensitivity versus food allergy. And most doctors are only comfortable with food allergy testing. And those are very basic, and most of the time are not abnormal for most people.
This is amazing. I'm just sitting here thinking, this is answering so many questions for me personally. And then Courtney, the whole conversation has been so enlightening. Okay, so now that leads us to the question, Courtney or Teresa, both, and I can have things to share too. Like, so somebody who does have a leaky gut, so what again would be like a good first step? We know like fatty foods, like healthy fatty foods and things, but how can we repair our gut health?
I think for me, from the standpoint, once again, I'm not like a gut health expert by any means for nutrition,
Sure.
but in general, like just allowing yourself to include probiotic and prebiotic rich foods. So things like yogurt, sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, I can never say that word. Some of those probiotic rich foods, or taking a high quality probiotic that's going to have, a variety of different strains, and then also making sure you're getting prebiotic food. So probiotics are the actual microbiota. Prebiotics are the what fuel the microbiota. And so that's going to be foods like oats and bananas and garlic and onions and some of those type of foods that are going to be fueling the microbiota. Another thing that's underrated, and I think that people don't realize just in general with their digestion, is slowing down, taking a deep breath before they eat, chewing their food, actually sitting and enjoying and chewing their food instead of just scarfing it in, and your body's not able to absorb everything, and there's a lot higher risk of malabsorption if you're just stressed while you're eating, because you want to get into that rest and digest state. And so it's not always easy for people, but I do really, when I do talk about gut health, I do just talk about taking deep breaths and chewing your food and really focusing on what you're eating and enjoying your food versus, eating in the car or eating while you're eating distracted, or just really focusing on enjoying whoever you're able to eat with, that food with them.
That's great advice. Courtney, since you work with clients, and I think you have a focus in couples as well, give us, I don't know if you have any personal stories that you can share of working with a couple, or, just how long it takes, for people to get their lifestyle changed and what success you've seen in that.
Definitely. So I have a couple client stories I could share, but one recently, she had 2 or 3 miscarriages before seeing me. And her husband was also just doing a typical high, just Western type diet, and drinking a ton of coffee. And so we started working together, and I think we were working together about 5 or 6 months prior to her getting pregnant. My programs are 4 to 6 months long, because not only does it take a while to create habits, but it also just takes a while. What we're eating now impacts our egg quality in about 3 cycles. What we're eating, or about 90 days, what our, males are doing. I think sperms regenerate every 64 to 80-ish days. So it does take a little bit of time. And I think even just, the emotional side of month after month, it's easy to just give up. Okay, well, I'm making these changes. It's been a month, nothing's happening. So it does take a little while. And so this client specifically couple had been with me for, that 4 to 6 month range. And she also was told that she had PCOS, and they didn't really run a ton of labs. And even they didn't run fasting insulin. And once we looked at her glucose and fasting glucose and insulin, it was clear that she was pretty borderline insulin resistance. And she was having irregular cycles. She had low progesterone. And we found that she kind of had a hypothyroidism a little bit. And so we were really focusing on just nourishing her hormones in general. She was one of my clients too that wasn't getting enough healthy fats. And in general, she had never even heard of what balancing blood sugar was. Her androgen levels, her testosterone and things, were high as well, which they hadn't tested prior. So once we got some of these testing, and I believe her inflammation might have been higher than I like it to be seen. So just through focusing on more of an anti-inflammatory diet, including more healthy fats, focusing on getting some mindful movement in, she kept working with me and ended up, she's 12 weeks. I think I just got to see an ultrasound recently with her, and she's just so grateful. And she also was really struggling emotionally, and she was so scared to get pregnant again, obviously, as you can understand, with having 2 to 3 miscarriages in a row. And so, just that's one of my missions as well, is just to provide hope, because I personally understand, you can get into a really low place just with month after month with that disappointment. And so just bringing that hope back into there and just lighting a fire again and allowing them to realize that it is possible and that all things with God are possible. And so that was just, yeah, it's just such a joy to be able to like be on that journey with them and be able to like witness the joy of life coming into their womb. And I can't say that every single client gets pregnant, obviously, but yeah, walking on that journey with them is a great honor for me. And so, yeah, that's
beautiful.
one specific story.
Courtney, this is such a powerful interview. I feel like so many people listening are going to have great ways to get started in terms of things they may not have ever thought to try for their health. And even just what you shared with this hope and just knowing too, like giving that context in America, we live in this quick fix thing, like quick fix culture, but just knowing it does take time. And I think that's sometimes the most difficult part is the time, but then also not knowing the outcome of the time. Right.
Yes.
So then in that time, and that's another thing that we know about you, Courtney, through your bio and just the work you're doing is just kind of that like spiritual health sort of aspect. And that's a whole other thing, but like that acceptance or that peace that might come with just, that journey of time. But Courtney, this has been so great. I'm going to ask you that very last question I ask every interview. Unless Teresa, do you have any other last thoughts before I?
No, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And then Courtney, so I'll ask, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how people can follow you too, and learn more about your work. So, Courtney, what do you wish every young woman knew about her hormone genius?
In general, I just wish every woman knew, first of all, that their hormones and their fertility is just such a gift, and just in general that there's reasons, and like if they're having symptoms, like it's not their body's broken, it's not that their hormones are broken, it's just that their body's speaking to them, and that something is going on underlying. And I just would love to spread just a message of hope to, if there is any women out there that are suffering infertility, just to dig a little deeper, continue to just don't give up and just keep digging deeper, because there's probably an answer out there.
Beautiful. Awesome, Courtney. We'll share with our listeners how they can learn more about you.
They can go to my Instagram, which is at natural.fertility.dietitian, or even my website at www.courtneywardayrd.com.
Awesome. And we'll have that information too in the notes as well. But yeah, Courtney, so good. Thank you so much. This was an interview well worth having for our listeners. We actually did an interview with Courtney like about 6 or 7 months ago, but the recording never saved. So we're thankful for you, Courtney, for the time you're spending with us again, and your patience as well. Because again, I think what you shared is going to be extremely helpful for those listening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, Courtney. Well, you have a great day, and thanks again.
Thanks, Courtney.
Yes, thank you.